next question is regarding the, you see, we are having like two pizza rules, you know, and we see a lot of people say Agile and DevOps are more easy to fit for small teams, but there are challenge for large scales for organization levels. And how do you see organization can overcome the Agile and DevOps practice in large scales? That's how do you see it? Ari, maybe start with you this time.
Yeah. Of course, if you want to do Agile in just a team of 6 people versus a company of 600, bigger brings complexity, and that's as simple as that, right? So, and the big point is in this way of working, you have to do it together, to get the success. But the misperception of people, the myth that you can only do it with small teams is bollocks, because when I started doing this in the mid 90s, in the beginning, I always had teams like 25, 30 people, maybe. And my largest team that I work with on what we call the project at the time was close to 100 people. That's not an organization. It's not a company, I know. But it's not just that small team, because, there are jobs that go beyond with just one team. And if you do, like full delivery, if I was with clients putting a new product, right, in the market, then you need to have your marketing in place. Legal has to have done the job. There need to be, in this case, there was audit was connected to it. We had the data conversion. We had 6 teams working in parallel. It's all done. It's been there, right? And the fact that it's maybe more complicated and maybe more difficult, or maybe it even is for sure, that doesn't mean that you don't have to do it. But what people tend to say is, oh, that's impossible, before even doing it. Or they bump into one problem and say, oh, see, it doesn't work. And that's what you have to get over it. And this is the old school thinking. It's not something that you try. And you have to get, Agile is not a purpose. DevOps is not a purpose. It's, okay, we have an organization, and I'm not talking profit organizations only. It's also, where I live, governmental organizations. Look at where we are in the COVID crisis. Okay, things are changing faster than ever. How, as an organization, can we make sure that we are able to follow the changes and respond to that change with a high level of quality, whether I'm a company making money, whether I'm an organization serving the public? And the question is not can we, no, the question is how. And that's what I miss very often, and we all know when you're on stage or when you're in front of a group, those people that sit in front of you and they listen to criticize. You're halfway your first sentence, they will say it's not true. And where we need to go together, and what really makes the difference is listen to understand. So you had your best practice, man, tell me, learn me, because if it works for you, maybe it will work for me. Can I find a corner in this organization where I can try it? If I don't feel secure, can I try it? And then start expanding from there, instead of putting it out on the whole organization and then expecting it to be perfect overnight. That's where we need to go. Large organizations can be done. It's not easy, right? It's not easy. And this is why I said in the beginning, a lot of organizations still struggle with the basics, but you have to do it. That's the point.
So Ari, there's like a lot of frameworks and models like SAFe or LESS or Spotify model to helping organizations implementing Agile and DevOps in large scale. Do you see those methods will helping those organizations overcome the scaling problems and new challenges?
I think in general, they do help to overcome. The problem is what I just referred to. I like a phrase from Winston Churchill. Churchill said at one moment, perfection is not a state, perfection is an ambition. To reach your ambition, you need to change a lot. So perfect people change a lot. But what we do is, in the past, the way we work was totally prescribed. This is how we work. And now we expect, again, totally pre-described, something that tells us how to work. And then we get a manual. And my God, we are so happy because we have a manual that tells us what to do. Instead of getting, and now we're back to the beginning of the interview, right? Instead of getting back to, okay, what is the mindset below all this? Why are we doing this? How can we make it work? And then taking the practices from the methodologies that help you most. That's where you need to go.
Right. All right. Thanks. Patrick, what's your say regarding the sizing and scaling?
Yeah, I think a lot of the frameworks and practices are focused on making things visible for people outside of their own group, and nurturing communication. I don't think that this is the actual end goal. The actual end goal is that you can kind of rely and trust the other groups to do the right thing. Yeah, but before you got to understand what they were asking for, you got to understand what they need, and this building up of trust. I think the best way to describe it is that when I ask somebody, "What is your hiring strategy?" I hire somebody who can take away part of my problems. And if you trust a person that can take away part of your problems, that means you're trusting them to deal with something. You don't have to focus on that. But building that trust is both done by leveling them up on education. Sometimes they need education. It's just not a matter of how well they're doing. So, educate your people, making sure they are reliable in a way that you get your practices going, they show up, and so on. But the hardest part is that making them care. Like, why should they care about your problems? Why should they care about the business? And kind of dealing with that is the hard part of scaling something in an organization. Obviously, consensus and making sure everybody's on the same page. But if everybody's caring about the same things and they're aligned on the same goals, that really helps. But part of the trust is the double-edged sword between, we want to give the self-organizing teams everything they can decide themselves versus a global central strategy that feels they have to be steering, which creates a conflict. Like, on the one hand, you don't trust them. You just want them to report to you all the time. You can do whatever you want, but you need to report and I can steer. So that kind of creation of trust is really hard. But working on building that trust is what makes it scale in an organization. And sometimes it's the one-person relationship between one team and the other, one person in the management team and the other, but building those interpersonal kind of relationships of trust, where you rely on somebody else, you don't have to do it yourself, that frees you from the cost. Like, meetings are very costly, report meetings are very costly. So turning it around, like, right, whatever you do is building trust in many different ways. Is kind of the way how this scales.
Right, thanks both. So to summarize the answers, to implementing Agile and DevOps practice, you also need to have a right mindset, but also the way how you manage your people, if you're micromanagement people, and the way you're reporting, the trust, the mindset are very important, because that's also costs a lot of time, and the self-management team require a lot of trust, and that also will help organizations implementing those practices in the large scales.